I'd now like to introduce to you Dr. Andrea Vornoli. Andrea holds a PhD in pharmacology and toxicology science at the University of Bologna. Currently, he works at the research at the Cesare Maltoni Cancer Research Centre of the Ramazzini Institute in Italy. And I think I said earlier about the importance of the MTP study, and I would say exactly the same about the Ramazzini Institute. And this is at low-level microwaves that we are being told are totally safe, and as a result of which we are allowing residents in hospitals and schools and young children to be irradiated at the levels that the Ramazzini Institute are causing the same problems as the NTP. Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, first of all, to the organizer, in particular to both of you for the support and for giving me the possibility of being here to show you the results of one of the most important research for what concerns the number of animals and the result we found about the radiofrequency radiation effect. But let me start with a short introduction of our research center. In particular, the Istituto Ramazzini takes its name from Bernardino Ramazzini, that was the father of occupational medicine, and the first that said that it pays for more to prevent than to treat. And it was the authors, among the other things, of the Morbis Artificum Diatriba. Our research center is called the Cesare Maltoni Cancer Research Center because the famous oncologist founded our research center in 1969 and located the research center in this beautiful castle where we still are working. It is a castle of the 15th century, and so we mixed a sort of history mixed with science. In fact, with more than 200 compounds or physical agents, as in the cases of the studies on extremely low frequency electromagnetic field and radiofrequency radiation studies, we are the second research center in the world after the National Toxicology Program for number of substances studied. We also have inside our structure the breeding facility, and we produce our rats with a family tree of Sprague-Dawley rats from the 70s until now, with more than 200,000 animal studies across the history. Now, the Cesare Maltoni Cancer Research Center is part of the Ramazzini Institute, that is a non-profit, independent, and it is very, very important for what we research, a cooperative located in Bologna. Our work principally involves strategies based on environmental diseases, and in particular cancer. With more than 27,000 associates each year covering about 30% of our budget, we are very transparent in this sense, and because of this, our budget is annually published on our website, and incomes include funds from national and international public institutions, liberal donation, and contribution from private citizens and NGOs such as Environmental Health Trust. The Ramazzini Institutes can count on the support of our scientific committee that every year meet during the Ramazzini Days that are settled in Carpi, close to Bologna, that is the birthplace of Bernardino Ramazzini, where all these eminent scientists from national and international institutions meets to present the most recent results on the field. Among these, you can see Lennart Ardell. But let's go to the peculiarity of our work, namely the Sprague-Dawley rats we use in our experiments. Here I want to show you that it represents a human equivalent model. And I show you this comparison distribution by 8 that we perform a long time ago in collaboration with the Trieste Hospital in Italy. And we take into account more than 1,000 people with malignant tumors out of more than 2,500 autopsied, decised at the hospital of Trieste. And more than 1,000 Sprague-Dawley rats died for malignant tumors out of more than 3,000 necropsied male and female untreated rats taken from controls group from different studies. And what it emerged is that 10 human years are equivalent to 16 weeks in rat. And in particular, as you can see from this graph, in particular, the yellow bar represents the rats and the red one, the humans. More than 80% of tumors arise after 65 years of age, namely 104 or 106 weeks in rats. So this to stress the importance of perform a lifespan studies as we do. Another important aspect is the prenatal or neonatal exposure as we usually perform. This is the case of vinyl chloride, for example. And as you can see with the two different doses, what we observed is that these two different types of tumors, hepatocarcinoma and hemangiosarcoma, the onset of this tumor was only in the offspring and not in the breeders. And it was because, and it was demonstrated about 20 years later after this evidence, that in the breeders, that in the offspring, the animal have not developed a battery of cytochrome P450, in particular 2A1 cytochrome P450, in order to metabolize this substance. And that's why it leads to this increase in tumors. But which were the Ramazzini Institute studies on electromagnetic field? This is electromagnetic spectra. You have already seen this before. And our studies were focused on extremely low frequency, as I told before, that represent the power line, for example, in our environments, and on radio frequency radiation. In particular, we studied the effect of radio-based antenna at the frequency of 1.8 gigahertz. Let's talk about the integrated experimental project on ELF-EMF. I will show you very fast our results in order to concentrate on the radio frequency radiation study later. So our integrated project consists in three main experiments. This one was the most important, as you can see from the number of animals used. And it was the experiment in which animals were exposed only to ELF sinusoidal 50 Hertz. In the other two experiments, 2 CIM and 3 CAM, the animals were exposed with a non-carcinogenic agents at doses that were per se non-carcinogenic. In particular, the formaldehyde at the dose of 50 milligrams per liters, starting from the 6 weeks of age till 104 weeks of age, and to a unique una tantum gamma radiation acute dose of 0.1 gray. This is the exposure system that was represented by several independent toroidal-shaped magnetic devices with a wood support that is not able to interfere with the magnetic field that supported all the animal cages that were located inside the structure. Electricity flows in the wires all around the toroids and generates a magnetic field inside the structure, avoiding obviously any interference problem between the single device. The first publication we did was that one with formaldehyde, in which we underline a enhancing effect of an enhancing carcinogenicity effect of ELF on formaldehyde. The current exposure to lifespan 50 Hertz and the dose that I mentioned before of formaldehyde generates a significant increase in the incidence of total malignant tumors, C-cell carcinomas, and hemolympho-reticular neoplasias in male Sprague-Dawley rates compared to negative control. Also, C-cell carcinoma and lymphoma cell leukemia were increased, statistically significant increase, also with respect of the positive control. And in particular, concerning C-cell carcinoma, our results reinforced the biological significance of the same increased evidence observed in the NTP study that was classified equivocal by Borman et al. In 1999. The second study we published, always in the same year, was that one in a combination with gamma radiation, the acute low dose. And the results are these. A significant dose-related increase in the incidence in mammary adenocarcinoma in both the sex compared to negative control, and also a dose-related increase in incidence in heart malignant schwannoma. The only other case in which we found malignant schwannoma is when we treated the animal with radiofrequency radiation, we will see later. And also a significant increase in the incidence of hemolympho-reticular neoplasia in male compared to negative control. Also, mammary adenocarcinoma in female, lymphoma leukemia in male were statistically significant increase with respect also to the positive control, so the animal only treated with gamma radiation. The last, but not the least, publication of this integrated experimental project was made in 2018 and regard the administration of ELF EMF alone. And as you can see from this table that summarize all the results from the whole experimental project, in particular in this box, with respect of the other two combination studies, no statistically significant increase in benign or malignant tumors were observed in the animal treated with the electromagnetic field alone. So, in conclusion, regarding this integrated project, we demonstrate that in our experimental condition, when administered alone, this type of electromagnetic field are not carcinogenic. But in light of our results on the carcinogenic effect of ELF, EMF in combination with the two known carcinogenic agents at low doses, the ELF, EMF act as a cancer enhancer in the presence of these substances. So let's go in medias res, integrated experimental projects on radiofrequency radiation. This is the experimental plan, simplified, in which you can see that the main experiment involved about 2,500 animals and exposed this animal to a frequency of 1.8 gigahertz, and the results are only partially published because on the basis of the first impression given by the first results published by the NTP in 2016 that involves the specific organ brain and heart, we decide with our few resources with respect of NTP to focus on these organs before to finish all the other organs of the animal that we are for to complete this here. And so we publish only the results for the moment on heart and brain. We will see the results. Another experiment that we perform is that one with the same the same exposure of radio frequency radiation, but in combination with an acute low dose of gamma radiation, as in the case of the extremely low frequency electromagnetic field. And in these cases, all tissues are embedded, and the preparation of the slide for all the organ is ongoing. While the publication of the whole experiments regarding the main experiment is planned for the end of 2019. This was the exposure system that gives you an idea of the different rooms in which the animals were exposed to different intensities from the antenna located in the center of this structure. The rats were located in 4 rooms that were totally shielded in order to minimize, as you can see from the wall here, in order to minimize the effect of field's non-uniformity due to the reflection and interference caused by the walls. And the cages were located in the wooden circular-shaped device, I show you, with a single exposure device in the center. And each of these structures served at least 400 rats. All the devices were identical, and clearly different intensity of radiofrequency radiation was provided, as reported by the experimental design I show you. These are part of our exposure system with the antenna in the center, the probe close to the cage, and all the material used for example, the plexiglass of the cage, the wood of the structure were thought for not to interfere with the electromagnetic field. And yeah, I show you the NTP results close to our results, and also the experimental design in parallel. As you know, the NTP nomination for their study was made by the Food and Drug Administration, as Ron told us before, and animals were exposed to frequency and modulation currently used in cellular communication in the United States. In our case, the nomination for the Ramazzini Institute was performed simply on the basis of the number of people exposed, most of the people, all the people, and the obviously inadequacy of the information on the possible hazard at that time when the experiment starts. Both the experiment of the Ramazzini and the NTP started concomitantly in the same year. And in our cases, the animals were exposed to frequencies and modulation that mimic the commonly human population exposure to radio-based antenna in the world. So, a near-field study in the case of NTP, a far-field study in our case. The difference between the two studies is that in our studies, the research was lifespan and do not finish at 106 weeks. Both the studies started prenatally. These are the experimental plan of the two studies, and in particular, in our cases, the animal underwent 0 volt-meter radiofrequency radiation in the case of control, and then 5, 25, and 50 volt per meters exposure. As Ron told us before, the exposure of the National Toxicology Program was made of 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off increments for a total of 9 hours a day exposure, 7 days a week. While in our case, since we have to reproduce an antenna, for example, that is outside here, that exposes each one of us continuously, we expose the animals continuously for 19 hours a day, 7 days a week. The 5 hours lack is because we have to monitor the animal, to give food to the animal, to change the cage and other stuff like this. This scale represents the specific absorption rate of the two experiments that give you the impression of how our doses are so lower with the respect of the one of the NTP. In particular, our higher dose was 15 times lower than the lower dose of the NTP, till to 1,500 times lower than their lower dose. These are the findings. I do not focus on the one of the most important one, obviously, of the NTP, because they are, as already explained before. But in our cases, we found a slight, not significant dose-related increase in malignant glioma in female rats. You have to understand that our doses are very, very lower than the one of NTP, but most of all, in the heart, we found a statistically significant and dose-related increase in malignant schwannoma in males, and also a non-significant increase of hyperplasia of Schwann cells that, as they told us before, they are a sort of pre-neoplastic lesion. So our results were published in this journal in 2018, while the clear evidence of carcinogenicity was demonstrated in the same year at the National Toxicology Program, where I had the possibility to assist, because in that period I was at the National Toxicology Program for perform a fellowship of different months to do some mechanicistic studies on the DNA of our tumors. I'll show you later. This slide evidence it is so important to perform an experiment that is made lifespan, because as you can see from the cumulative prevalence of animals with heart malignant schwannoma, in this case by age at death distributed here, more than the 90% of our tumors, the tumors found in our studies, were found after the famous 104 weeks of age, namely the 65 years in men. These are preliminary results regarding fertility and litter, and in particular, litter mean body weight in group 4, namely the one treated with the higher dose, was significantly decreased compared to those of the unexposed controls, starting from postnatal day 1 and through the lactation period. In particular, in this table is highlighted the period between the postnatal day 9 to 13. And the lack of further increases in body weight over the course of lifespan carcinogenicity study suggests us that probably this effect on body weight is specific of the perinatal period. These will be results in the final report we will publish probably in the few next months. So, in conclusion, the Ramazzini Institute findings on far-field exposure are consistent with, if we want to reinforce the results of the NTP study on near-field exposure. And most of all, the tumors of the brain and heart that were observed in our experimental animal in both the study have the same histological origin on those observed in some epidemiological studies on cell phone users. And for us, at least for us, these experimental studies provide sufficient evidence to call for the re-evaluation of the YARC. And in fact, this is only one of the few good positive news. The YARC has included the radiofrequency radiation among the high priority for the monograph program for the next 4 years. So probably the radiofrequency radiation and the electromagnetic field will be re-evaluated in the next few years. This is a very interesting results from a scientist from the UK, Phillips, that show, and this was already mentioned by Lena Tardell before, but I want to show you this graph that show this red line in particular, the increase in the last decades of the tumor the glioblastoma tumors, the most aggressive in particular, the glioblastoma multiforme, in particular lobes in the brain, and specifically in the temporal and frontal lobes, with the respect of all the others incidents of brain tumors in other lobes in the brain. This representing that probably the part that are more exposed during a phone call determined this incredible increase. This was a publication that was made a few weeks ago and involves all the publication that were made until now, so it is very updated regarding the mammalian in vivo studies and the effects were observed about this regarding radiofrequency radiation, and in particular it focused on cancer aspects and reproductive developmental aspects. So what are the next steps for our research? First of all, to complete the histopathology that is almost complete for all the other organs of the animals in the radiofrequency studies, to perform a pathology working group, as we always do with our colleagues, international colleagues, to validate our results, and also understand the mutational landscape of glial tumors, and also any other molecular changing of radiofrequency radiation study in comparison with that of humans. And this is a study that it was performed by me and the colleagues of NTP at the NTP during my fellowship. This is the first abstract I show you that was presented at the STP meeting in Raleigh this summer. And in particular, what we did, we performed a targeted resequencing, that it is a very innovative and particular technique on rat tumor DNA. In order to, this is the poster, that was the title of the abstract. And our aim was to design, develop, and validate the targeted amplicon-based next generation sequencing panel specifically for rat gliomas and schwannomas for detecting genetical alteration in most common cancer-related genes in rat brain tumors. And this was performed on the basis of a very recent publication made in 2017 on Nature Genetics that evidenced the most important mutation in the different genes in humans when you have a glioma. And what we observed in the preliminary results that we have to validate with other sequencing in particular, in contrast to most human gliomas, which generally harbor mutation in IDH1 and 2, and also in TERT promoter, in our cases, the glioma harbor mutation in other genes and seems to be IDH1 wild type. But we will see. Speaking about a little bit of the 5G and the Internet of Things, what we expect to face is that from all the technology and the current technology, we will shift to higher frequency that use centimetric and millimetric waves. I don't know what to lose too much time on this because people before me has already told about this, but the 5G is the next generation of mobile network that will allow the existence of the famous Internet of Things, in which all the objects in our that we have, all our device, will be connected wireless on internet. And what the technology will do? In practice, the technology will exploit a new channel, untapped with now. The frequency to beyond the 26 gigahertz will guarantee probably more speed and less latency. And also, the diffusion of this technology is planned for the next 2-3 years, at least in Italy. And for what we know till now, the past technologies used ubiquitously for decades with our mobile phone, computer, and other device create radio frequency radiation exposure that represents, for what we show it today, a serious risk for human, animal, and environmental health, as demonstrated by a lot of studies. So, before the diffusion of these technologies, there is an urgent need to assess the 5G health effects now. The Ramazzini Institute is available for this, and to do this before the million of people are exposed is the very most important thing. Without repeating what they are the mistakes of the past, here I show you some impressive results of the past of the Ramazzini Institute. And as you can see, there is a prediction of decades before that YARCs pronunciate about the carcinogenicity of this substance. For example, the benzene, as you can see, we found the first evidence of carcinogenicity in 1979. Now, each of one known that benzene is carcinogenic, but YARC pronunciate only in 2012. 33 years later us. And so many other substances, for example, another important is asbestos, 23 years of difference, and others. So I want to thank for the support to conclude our studies, all these association. And in particular, I want to mention the Children with Cancer UK and Environmental Health Trust. And with this last sentence, I really thank you for the attention.